I'll start with you, Kang. You know, we talked about how quick this summit came to light in the first place and the on again, off again leading up to this meeting. How well prepared are both sides right now? The president's saying, look, it doesn't really require a whole lot of preparation. This all comes down to attitude.
Yes, it seems to me that both sides work so well, but unfortunately they have not been able to agree on the details yet. It seems to me that each side is demanding its own the request from their own perspective. That's why actually Sung Kim and Choi Kang will meet today. Maybe probably a little bit higher level meeting could be possible to iron out the differences between the two parties. But South Korean side actually have taken a step side because actually they see this nuclear issue is directly concerned between the North Korea and the United States. But South Korea wants any kinds of deal or any kinds of agreement to come out from this meeting.
And John, you know, we talked about how we've seen this change of tone coming out from the Trump White House. At first, they were thinking this was going to be a big breakthrough in one meeting, but it seems like this is not just a one-off anymore. They're saying this could take multiple ones. But what do we need to see on Tuesday for that to happen, for us to see a second or third meeting?
Sure, Yvonne, a couple of things. One is some aspect of a joint statement, a very basic type of statement where the two sides would lay out these goals and some aspects of some principles, but that would lead to a possible second thing, which is the official beginning and launching of a denuclearization mechanism. President Trump has referred to it as a process, but I think this is an indication that overall the meetings that now Secretary of State Pompeo, but previously Director of CIA Pompeo, the meetings that he's had with Kim Jong Un and subsequent interactions gives a sense of more details here that have to be ironed out, but much better than we were at a few months ago where there was no contact.
All right, now, John, talking about denuclearization here, the definition of it is very different if you look at it from both sides. Is this something that can actually be overcome?
But earlier on, Secretary Pompeo referred to something called a denuclearization mechanism. I think it's the acknowledgement that there's still a gap in terms of the understandings and definitions related to denuclearization by the North Korean and U.S. sides. But within this type of mechanism, it provides the space for the two sides to work on who does what, when, where, and how. But that all has to be framed within the context of the two leaders, President Trump and Chairman Kim, coming to agreement on the broader goals here.
I want to bring Kang Choi back in here. Kang, you have looked tremendously into sanctions and how that has helped here. To what degree should sanctions continue on, and when would you say, okay, now we can maybe take some off? Or do you think that it's just sanctions all the way through the end of whatever this is?
Actually, it depends on the progress and pace we can make in denuclearization aspect. So maybe depends on the North Korean side's action on denuclearization. We can lift up the sanctions step by step, not all at once. But on the other hand, actually, there are other sanction mechanisms that's taken by the United States unilaterally. So, for example, the state sponsoring terrorism or the Enemy Trade Act, or Patriot Act, all those three things can be applied in addition to UN resolution. So actually it's possible to lift up sanction gradually, but on the other hand, maybe because it depends, for example, U.S. administration has been emphasizing we will keep this maximum pressure until the end of completion of denuclearization. But actually, it seems to me that there's a gradual lift up of sanctions depending on the progress we can make on the nuclear side.
John, there's still that issue of goodwill. I have to wonder, I mean, John, I'll continue this question here. What's at stake for Pyongyang? Because if, in fact, it commits to complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization, I mean, that's essentially taking away that bargaining chip, that only deterrent that they have on the international stage. What happens when that fear is, in fact, gone?
Well, we have a long way to go. There's deep animosity and deep mistrust on both sides. And so with respect to what the two leaders are trying to do here, it's with this mechanism trying to create a venue where the two sides can make these steps. As Choi Kang has mentioned, the idea of a phased approach is something that the South Korean government, the Moon Jae-in administration, has been advocating. But here there's some concrete steps. Ultimately, we're going to look at dismantlement of some of these North Korean facilities. But for the United States, there's a priority focus on trying to get us before July of last year, and that's before North Korea conducted these intercontinental ballistic missiles that started to put the American homeland at risk. So these are the steps that I think will build the confidence, but the expectation that the broader and the more specific denuclearization movements will happen later in the process.
Kang, I mean, we've been talking about this drama over G7, and once again, the president pulling out of a big institution or the communique this time around. But, you know, after the TPP, after the Iran deal, after the Paris Climate Accord, is there still trust there for Kim Jong Un to actually make any type of concession?
It is not a matter of trust because it is a matter of pressure coming from the United States. For example, when Minister Kim Jong Un and Minister Choi Kang made a statement, actually it provoked the American side very much, and Trump decided to terminate the summit. So actually that actually changed the North Korean mind. So it seems to me that North Korea is under pressure. They know this international coalition against North Korea working against their own interests. So it seems to me that not actually trust, but actually kinds of pressure side has been working very effectively. So it seems to me that how we can maintain international coalition on North Korean issue, and also how we can have a kinds of good divisional level among all the concerned parties is going to be a key factor which will actually keep the North Korea on the right track.
Now, Kang, I'm curious. A lot of critics have said that Donald Trump has given up way too many concessions already, and that it would be a political domestic coup at home already for Kim Jong Un when he goes back. But looking at the positive side of things, if there's one thing that Donald Trump brings to the table that has been something to the upside that's positive, what would that be?
For example, maybe the human rights issue, and also the other issue that was mentioned by John was like ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, because actually now we have been focused much on the nuclear front. But if we are able to put the human rights issue and as a kind of agenda for discussion for later phase, and also the ICBM, not only ICBM, but also all other relevant missile capability. Of course, there could be two more, the chemical and biological weapons. That could be an issue. And the other element we have to think about is kind of time framework of denuclearization. All previous agreement we made North Korea doesn't have any time framework at all, very abstract in time framework in implementation. But if we are able to have time framework on denuclearization process, it would be a good the point we can say.
At the end of this week, Kang, what would be the best case scenario for a win for South Korea? What would they be happy about that's realistic?
Maybe if there is any agreement which can contain any principles or guidelines for denuclearization, that could be the minimum level of satisfaction South Korea can have. But if there is a word like a CVID or time-bound framework on verification, that could be a kind of A+ for South Korean governments to honor this kinds of agreement made between the United States and North Korea.
John, we have just one last question. You know, we were talking to some other guests earlier this morning saying, look, given the downtime that we've seen between the two leaders here today on Monday, that perhaps Kim Jong Un might reach out for an impromptu meeting, maybe even a golf session here today for President Trump. How likely is that going to happen, do you think? And what does this mean for the MO in terms of the negotiating strategy for North Korea? How do they actually operate in some of these negotiations?
On the Gulf front, I don't think that's likely right now. If you think of it from the security details and things like that, the pre-advanced preparations for that would have had to gone into the works for a while now. But with respect to creating the dynamics, as we heard earlier, Kang mentioned that Sung Kim from the U.S. side and Choi Kang on the North Korean side, they're scheduled to meet at 10 a.m. Singapore time. So this idea of ironing out details, and fortuitously, you also have Secretary of State Pompeo and Foreign Minister Young Ho in Singapore as well. There's a possibility to do some of the final prep work. And I think with that, that's going to be the key use of the time leading up to the summit between the two leaders on Tuesday morning.